Okay, good to go. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this regular meeting, March meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Ask for a roll call, please.
Yes, good evening, Planning Commissioners. We have Commissioner Moyer.
Here.
Commissioner Slant.
Here.
Commissioner Benefield.
Here.
Vice Chair Allen.
Here.
And Chair LaFevers.
Here. Thank you. If you would all please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Any introductions, presentations, announcements?
Chair, I don't have any for you this evening.
Okay. Very good. Keep moving then. Next item on the agenda is public comment on items that are not on our agenda tonight. Anybody here to speak on an item that's not on the agenda? Doesn't look like it, so we'll move on. Next item is our consent calendar, which is the minutes of our February 5th meeting. So I know that we have some questions and comments with regards to those minutes, so I'm going to open up a discussion on that item. Commissioner Salant, I know you had...
Yes, I have a correction to the minutes regarding my comments that I would like to simply give to you, as it's rather lengthy to go into right now. And I also have a question about what was in the minutes. On page 8 of the draft that we were given, it says that Attorney Mark Carlson requested that the city attorney's staff work with staff to draft the conditions of approval. So when will the staff written conditions of approval be available for the commissioners to see, to review?
Through the chair, Commissioner Slant, we have those conditions ready. They're part of the public record. We can make them available to you at any time.
Okay. Another question I had was, when will the planning commissioners be able to review the project to see if the applicant has met the conditions of approval?
Commissioner Slant, so in this case, the City Council has taken up an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of the project.
Okay,
And so the project is tentatively scheduled to be in front of the city council on March 26th. That's tentative at this point, but that's what we're targeting. And the council will be hearing the item de novo, which means brand new. So they've, when they appeal a project to themselves or they take a project up on appeal, like in this scenario, they take over the decision-making authority for the project from the Planning Commission.
I see, okay.
Are there, so we're still on consent calendar. We kind of pulled this item off of consent, so to speak. Are there other comments or questions on the minutes? And so if, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I think there's an item that maybe should be clarified on matters presented by commissioners. Maybe it's good enough. The text says, Commissioner Allen said that he and the Open Space Advisory Board urge the City Council, and I'm afraid that it sounds as if I'm speaking for that board. It probably should read something like Commissioner Allen said that the Open Space Advisory Board passed a motion urging the council to prioritize funding for reinstating an additional code compliance officer position, and that Commissioner Allen personally supports it as well, or something like that.
Through the chair, we can clarify that for the record.
And Commissioner Benefield?
I have a small correction on the ex parte list of people I spoke to. I didn't speak to that many, so one of them on here should be taken off. It's on page 2, 3rd line, 4th line. Take out Catherine Decker. I didn't talk to her, just ended up there.
Commissioner Benefield, we will make that correction as well.
Thank you.
And then my suggestion for Commissioner Slant's request, she has written, I think, written document she wants to provide to staff for corrections. Is that
Yes.
accurate? So perhaps she can provide those to you, and you can bring the minutes back to us at our next meeting. I don't think we need to go through them in
Good.
detail tonight. So with that, maybe just a motion to continue the minutes to next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. I'm just going to ask for a voice vote. All those in favor of continuing to the next meeting, the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Carries 5-0. Okay, I think we're good on the minutes. Thank you. We're getting ready to jump into our new public hearings, and our first one up is the Sanchez residence rebuild. And before we jump into that, just give commissioners an opportunity to disclose any ex parte communications that anyone has had with regards to the Sanchez residence rebuild project. Nope.
No.
No.
Okay. With that, I'll ask staff for a report. We're now opening public hearing on item 2.
Thank you, Chair LaFevers and Commissioners. My name is Brian Banks, acting as staff on the Sanchez Residence Demolition and Rebuild project. The proposed project is for the demolition of approval of the demolition of the remaining portions of the existing residence, which consists primarily of the foundation, to reconstruct the residence in the same location and at the same size. However, to approve the encroachment of approximately 120 square feet of the residence within the eastern side setback, and approximately 40 square feet of the previously existing covered front entry porch within the front setback. As I said, the proposed rebuilt residence would be rebuilt at the same size, approximately 744 square feet, and at the same height, slightly under 14 feet. As part of the proposed project, it would include required foundation and structural upgrades to meet current building codes. And the reason this project is before you today is because the request for to rebuilding within the required setbacks requires a conditional use permit and certain legal findings to be made by your commission. You might remember there was a similar project on Olive across from the middle school athletic field some months back. The proposed, or the site of the proposed project is here at 5091 Foothill Road. So you'll see Linden here, Foothill here, and then this is kind of that first cul-de-sac in Seacoast Village. And again, the project site is here, rectangular lot, and the structure that is proposed to be rebuilt is the primary residence, and that's here with this little star. On the site existing and no changes proposed are an existing accessory structure and the existing detached garage, and then you can see the existing driveway would remain as well. So today we're only looking at the residence itself, and no other changes are proposed. Here's a site plan, so we had to flip the page. So you'll notice Foothill Road is now on our right. Single-family residence here. The red outline approximates the property line, the rectangular lot. The green line approximates the required front, side, and rear setbacks, and the portions of the structure highlighted in yellow are what is at issue for you today. The encroachment into the eastern side yard setback of approximately 3.5 feet in the required 5.5 foot setback, and then approximately 4 feet of the covered entry within the front yard setback. Distinction here with the front yard setback, those are measured using two methods, and they both apply. One is requirement that buildings be set back 50 feet from the center line of the street, or in this case, Foothill Road, and a minimum of 20 feet from the edge of the right-of-way or at the property line. In this case, the setback results in the project complying with one but not the other. In some cases that works out. So the setback requirement is 50 feet from the center line and 20 feet from the right-of-way, and thus we need the CUP to allow that front porch to be rebuilt. You can see again, just for reference, the driveway, the existing detached garage, the existing accessory structure, which you'll note is also built within the existing western side setback and would be legal nonconforming. However, no alterations are being proposed, and that may remain. By way of history, the development here, and we actually have Miss Sanchez family's property, and near as we can tell based on the historic research, the structure was originally built circa 1931. So well before the city incorporated and had their zoning rules, and even before the county had zoning in this area of the county. Here's a photo pre-demolition. So again, from Foothill Road, you'll see the existing or the previously existing residence to be rebuilt on this side, the center driveway, that storage structure, and you can see the detached garage there in the back. I will note here you'll see that it has the apron for the driveway, but there is no sidewalk here. As part of the project approval, should your commission approve the project, it would be conditioned to require the infill of the sidewalk on both sides of the driveway spanning the property. Luckily, we have curb and gutter in there and the apron, but it would require the sidewalk as part of the frontage improvement that would be triggered by approval of the project. Here's another photo, not sure when in 2022, but pre work on On the residence, you'll see some of the needed repairs. The applicant came in February of 2023 for a fairly extensive remodel. A building permit was required for the interior remodel, structural work that was being proposed, new doors and windows, essentially a refresh of the entire residence. And as part of that process, you'll read in the staff report, that's when this issue of the CUP arose, because the contractor took the work into the required setback and proposed or demolished portions of the structure within those setbacks, and thus the applicant had to come in for the CUP because we could not allow them to rebuild those portions of the structure within the setbacks that were legal nonconforming without approval of the CUP. Here you can see both the east and south elevation. So south elevation would be facing the rear yard. Foothill would be on the other side. The east elevation, so this would be the portion of the structure that encroaches into the side setback. You'll see just one small window there. You'll also see the covered front porch that is proposed to be rebuilt within the required front setback there. So the west and north, so this would be the elevation you would see from Foothill Road, including that covered porch. On the west elevation, so you'll notice from the previous photographs that this slider door was proposed as part of that building permit in 2023 and was actually approved. So essentially everything you see here was previously approved, and the extent of the work, as I said, went beyond the scope of work that was approved in that February of 23 building permit, and therefore the need for the CUP. So in the analysis of the project with respect to policies, we've got the land use element, kind of overarching theme to preserve our small beach town character in the built environment, to encourage the remodeling and revitalization of neighborhoods in accordance with the community design element, which you'll see next. CD1, these are all familiar to you, I'm sure. Size, scale, and form, and their placement should be compatible with adjacent and nearby properties and with the dominant pattern of the district development. And then CD2, architectural designs based on historic regional building types should be encouraged and preserved in the city. Another more recent consideration here with our housing, the recently readopted housing element, goals to conserve housing stock. You'll see it here under policy, maintenance and repair, promote the maintenance and repair of owner-occupied and rental housing within the city, and also to facilitate the rehabilitation of substandard and deteriorated housing where feasible. I think this project squarely fits within both of those. With respect to your findings today, that the continued or upgrading the residential unit would not have an adverse effect on the surrounding neighborhood, that the capacity of the unit or units would not be increased beyond that was previously existing, and that the shortage of adequate housing within the city justifies the continuation of this nonconforming use and to make the necessary improvements. So in terms of the first finding, with respect to the neighborhood, as proposed, the residence is being built at the same size, same height, same location, pretty much aesthetically the same look, although upgraded because of current building codes in terms of materials and window energy efficiencies and those sorts of things, but at essentially the same exact footprint and size as the previous residence. In terms of the second finding, still only a single-family residence, and as I recall, it actually went down a bedroom, so no increase in the habitable capacity as a result of the project. And then, again, because of our housing shortage in the city, the continuation of the nonconforming use, in this case, with respect to the setbacks, both the east side and portion of the front necessary to upgrade the living conditions of the unit or units. The reality is when the owners invest this kind of money in a rebuild, we're probably looking at 75 to another 100 years for a rebuilt structure like this. So we're nearing 100 years, getting close in the 90s for that unit, and with hope, this kind of structure, modest in size in this neighborhood, could live on for another nearly 100 or more. For your consideration today, the adoption of the resolution that's attached to the staff report and approving the project, the CEQA exemption attachment, Exhibit 1, and recommended conditions approval, attachment Exhibit 3. Should you not make that decision, then you can direct staff and the applicant to prepare revisions to the project and return, or your option could be to deny the project as proposed and direct staff to return with findings for denial. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Thanks very much for the staff report, and I'll open it up to the commission for questions. I see Commissioner Salant.
Yes, I have a question. You were saying that one of the things that was necessary was to rebuild the foundation. It's not clear to me, was the entire house demolished or only part of it? If they're taking it all the way down to the foundation, why don't they just move it over and get it out of the non-conforming area? It's
Chair LaFevers and Commissioner Salant, that perfectly reasonable question. So the primary issue, we can go here, is that the site's kind of maxed out in terms of the driveway location, the accessory structure, and the entrance to the garage. So how it was planned out those many years ago, if we were to move the structure over, there are portions of it that will remain of the foundation that are proposed to remain and be upgraded where necessary, firstly. But the alternative of moving it over, it would conflict with the existing driveway and conflict with the ability to potentially park the two cars within the covered or within the detached garage and meet and satisfy the two covered parking space requirements. So we would be trading one nonconformity and potentially creating another, if that makes sense.
It appears to me in this drawing, if I'm reading it correctly, that one of these two cars already has a tough time getting in there.
Agreed. And so what you see here is
To do that, where it shows the driveway, does it drive over the curb?
Commissioner, through the chair, currently there's no obstruction here, but there is this landing here
yes,
where
I
those
see that.
doors are. There's no, sorry if I wasn't clear, there's no curb or anything here. We can go back to the photo.
So it doesn't even have a paved driveway?
It's a gravel driveway, Commissioner. This is that's correct, right? Gravel? It's paved. Oh, it is paved? I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's a paved driveway. You can see it here. So you can see it kind of widens out here.
Okay. And can you explain how much of the remaining existing foundation is just going to be upgraded and how much is new?
Commissioner Salant, through the chair, I don't have that percentage.
Okay.
So it would be where and perhaps the applicant architect can answer that question, but it would depend on what required structural components need to be upgraded to meet the current code. So as it stands now, not the entire foundation would be removed and be rebuilt, but the certain piers and corners and those
I see.
structural
Okay.
elements would need to be upgraded where necessary.
Got it. Okay.
We'll give the applicant or the representative an opportunity to address that further during the public comment period, or public hearing period. Any other questions, Commissioner?
No.
Okay. Questions from other commissioners? No? Okay. Very good. Thank you. We will move forward then, open the public hearing portion of the meeting on this project, and we'll give the applicant an opportunity to speak, or the applicant's representatives, or all of the above first. And if you would, please introduce yourself so we know who you are.
Commissioners, thank you for considering my project for conditional use.
Can you confirm
Turn
your
on
mic
the
is on? There
microphone.
should be a green light.
Got it.
And you
My
might
name is-
need
Can you
to
hear me?
get close, so.
My name is Laura Sanchez. I thought I would provide some background about the home and what this project means to my family. I'm a fifth-generation Carpinterian. My grandfather, Pete Sanchez, built the house at 5091 Foothill in 1931, and it's the family where my dad, Richard Sanchez, grew up. My grandpa Pete worked at the lemon packing house. When he married my grandfather, a white woman, they were unable to rent a home as a biracial couple. So they bought a little plat of land, which was at that point farmland on the outskirts of town. My grandfather had never built a house before, but it was his dream. So each week he took his paycheck to the lumber yard and purchased the materials that he needed. Week by week and paycheck by paycheck, the house went up. It was a labor of love, which is why it's so important for me to honor my grandfather and the home that he built. I have lived in the house for 20 years. Over the decades, it became quite fragile and impossible to heat. My goal with this project is to preserve and strengthen it, to bring it up to code, make it more efficient and livable for another 100 years, eventually for my brother's children to enjoy. I received a permit to rehabilitate the structure in February of 2023. However, through a perfect storm of miscommunication between me, our contractor, and his staff, the home was disassembled beyond the scope of our permits in June of 2023. It was an honest mistake, and I was devastated. In order to honor my grandfather's legacy and to restore the home with integrity, I'm requesting a conditional use permit to rebuild this house within the existing footprint. Like my grandfather, I plan to put all of my love and resources into this home. It will incorporate my grandmother's spice cabinet, which still smells like her cooking, the original kitchen sink, sweet symbolic remembrances from my dad's childhood, and the original and all of the original wood that's healthy enough to reuse. It will be a functional family heirloom for generations to come. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. I will ask one other question of the applicant's representatives, perhaps, with regards to the existing foundation. I don't know if you have any additional information to add on whether it's going to be completely removed or 50% removed. Just give us an idea.
Sure. I'm Sean Godkin. I'm the architect. Yeah, through the process for, getting our permits, we did have to get a soils report for this now, since it's over I forget the square footage trigger. I think it's 500 or 600 square feet. So now that it's considered mostly a new build, getting the soils report and then the findings of the soils report, you're going to have to remove the rest of the foundations, whatever percentage that is, will have to come out for the recompaction, and that's going to need to occur per the soils report. So.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Thanks for the clarification. All right. Public hearing still open. Anybody else here to speak on this item? Now's your chance. Doesn't look like it, so I will close the public hearing, bring the item back to the commission for additional questions, discussion, deliberation. Commissioner Moyer, would you like to start?
I get in trouble when I start.
Just so I'll do what Jane did to you.
I know.
Make sure you're up against your mic so we can all hear what you have to say.
Here I am. Can you hear me? All right. I feel that we can easily make those findings And this constitutes rehabilitating a housing stock. It's very important right now. And then that's beside the testimony of the applicant, which is very moving. I went to school with Richard, I think. Yeah. You'll have to show me a picture. I've gotten really bad. Anyway, so I can approve the, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Salant, would you like to offer your thoughts?
Well, I was very interested in the history of your house, and I urge you when you're done to put a historic plaque on the front. And if there is a list of historic houses in our city, you should try to get on the list. And I also was very impressed that you're trying to maintain and reincorporate the original wood and features of the house, because it will give it a lot of character that a brand new structure will not have. So I was very heartened by that. So good luck with your project.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen?
Yes, I'm fully in support of the project and can easily make the findings. So I'm also ready for a motion.
Well, I want to say something. Naturally. I love small houses. I've lived in 400 square foot houses, 500. The one I live in now is 3 times bigger than that. And all it does is accumulate more junk. So really small houses are the way to go. And I so love your story, the project. I have no problem approving it. And I'll make a motion to that effect if you like. I got to find it.
Thank you. Seems like we have consensus among the commission. I as well support the project and
Commissioner
can make the
Benefield,
fight.
we have the motion or some language there you can use to craft a motion up on the board if that's helpful.
Okay, are you?
Please, I'm ready to entertain a motion.
I move that. Where are we?
Number 1.
We adopt Resolution PC 24003 for the rebuild of the residence at 5091 Foothill Road, according to all the paperwork here. How do you say that? I haven't made a motion in a while. According to the staff's recommendation. Thank you. Only done this 30 years. And that's it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion before I ask for a voice vote? Okay, I'm going to ask for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Congratulations. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Okay, we are done with that item, so thank you again for joining us. Look forward to seeing it built. Give us a moment to regroup here, if you would, please. All right, we're going to take a 2-minute recess. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back and reconvening the meeting of the Planning Commission. So we are in new public hearings still. We're on item 3, amendments to the city's accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit regulations. I guess I'll just ask if there's any ex parte communications around this agenda item. Doesn't look like it. Okay. And then,
Well, I asked Commissioner Benefield a few questions today before the meeting, but she didn't know anything either.
And
Well, to the letter of the law.
through the chair.
yes.
And perhaps this might be an opportunity, since it's come up for council or staff, to quickly note, in the context of a legislative item like this, what kind of disclosures would be appropriate?
Through the chair, Chair Lefevers, ex parte disclosures aren't required for legislative items like proposed amendments to the city's ordinance. They're only required for applications for a development permit or a development project. So you're welcome to disclose communications prior to the hearing regarding this legislative item. However, it's not a legal obligation.
So to make it really clear to the public out there, we cannot be in a Brown Act violation if we discuss legislative items like this with council members, other commissioners, and so on.
Through the chair, Commissioner Allen, I would not go as far as to say that there are potential avenues in which a Brown Act violation could occur. However, you would not need to disclose your communications with individuals, whether any individual, prior to this item.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I appreciate the correction, partial correction, whatever we want to call it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Learned something new. All right, so let's move on to this item, and I'll ask for a staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've got Megan Musoff here from Long Range Planning to walk you through the proposed amendments to our ADU ordinance.
Thanks.
Hello, good evening, Chair Lefevers Commission. My name is Megan Musoff. I'm one of the newest staff members, assistant planner in Long Range Planning. Tonight I'll be speaking to you about updates to Carpinteria Municipal Code, Chapter 14.72, which covers the city's accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit regulations. Just a quick recap on what an ADU is. An ADU is a complete and independent living unit for one or more people. In Carpinteria, they can be in any zone that allows for residential use, and they can be on a lot with one or more residential units, so they can be on a single or a multifamily lot. ADUs can be detached or attached to the primary dwelling, and they require a coastal development permit and a building permit to build. A junior ADU, or a JADU, is a unit that's no larger than 500 square feet, and it must be entirely within the primary residential unit. So you may not have a detached JADU. And JADUs only require a building permit. A little bit of background on the city's ADU ordinance. Ordinance number 758 was our most recent update to the city's ADU regulations. This was essentially an overhaul of the city's old secondary dwelling unit regulations and replaced it with our accessory dwelling unit regulations. The Planning Commission recommended that City Council approve Ordinance 758 in August of 2022. It went through a first reading, a second reading at City Council. The second reading was in January of 2023. It passed, and these regulations went into effect in February of 2023. Separately, the city's 2023 to 2031 housing element was just readopted by City Council in January of 2024, and it includes an ADU-focused program in it. And I'll touch a little bit more on the implications of the housing element and ADUs later during our discussion items. And the reason that we've brought this before you today is that new state ADU laws came into effect in January 2023 and January 2024, which necessitated additional changes to our ordinance. And as a statistic for you, as of the publication of the staff report, the city has received 25 ADU applications and 5 JADU applications. So we're seeing a lot of interest for them. All right, so the laws of interest that I'll be touching on tonight that have caused us to come back with edits to our ordinance are SB 897 and 2221, which were passed by the state legislature in 2022, and AB 1332, 976, and 1033, which were passed in 2023. I provided you with a much more detailed list of the changes that these state laws implement in the staff report. There were a lot of detail-oriented changes made both to state law and in the proposed ADU ordinance. So in this presentation, I will highlight some of the most impactful changes and the ones that staff thought might be of the most interest to your commission. So first up, we have height restriction increases for ADUs that are within half a mile of walking distance of a major transit stop. These ADUs we must allow to be a maximum of 18 feet tall. ADUs that are on a lot with a multifamily, multi-story dwelling may also be up to 18 feet tall. And ADUs that are attached to the primary dwelling may be up to 25 feet tall. Additionally, existing non-conforming or unpermitted existing conditions cannot prevent an ADU from being permitted if these conditions are unrelated to the construction of the ADU. These new laws prohibit limits on front setbacks if those front setbacks prohibit at least an 800 square foot ADU. These laws require jurisdictions to allow ADU plan pre-approval by 2025. So this is one space where we're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of implementing state law. We already have 2 pre-approved ADU plan sets available for applicants on the website. And what this program essentially would do is anybody could come into the city with an ADU plan set and could have it pre-approved, and then anybody else that came in with that plan set would get an expedited approval of their project because the plan set has already been approved by the city. And also, there's now no more owner occupancy requirement for ADUs. There is still an owner occupancy requirement for JADUs. AB 1033 gives local jurisdictions the option to allow the separate conveyance of ADUs. So this would potentially be, you have an ADU in your backyard and you turn your house and your ADU into condos, and they could be sold separately. Again, this is an option, and I'll bring this up again as a discussion item for later. And our Housing Element Program 2, which focuses on ADUs. The city has committed in our housing element to offer incentives when ADUs are voluntarily deed restricted for low or moderate income people. This is also a discussion item that we'll bring up in a bit. So because ADU regulations are part of our zoning code, which is part of our local coastal plan, this project does go through a couple of steps before completion. Before we came to you tonight, this draft ordinance went through internal staff reviews. It was reviewed by the city attorney's office, and we also sought some early review and feedback from the Coastal Commission. Fortunately, they had no feedback for us. They said that it looked good. Tonight, that brings us to the Planning Commission hearing and hopefully a recommendation if your commission recommends that we send it to City Council. It'll go through a first reading with City Council. If they approve the first reading, we'll then take it to the State Housing and Community Development and Coastal Commission for their respective approvals. And then, if that goes well, it'll be brought back to City Council for a second reading and an adoption. Updating our ADU regulations is exempt from CEQA. Local ordinances that are implementing state ADU and JADU law are exempt from CEQA under Public Resources Code section 21080.17. And ADUs themselves are also typically, in most cases, exempt from CEQA review. So CEQA Guidelines Section 15303 exempts new construction or conversion of small structures, which includes a second dwelling unit in a residential zone, an ADU. Some Coastal Act considerations. Because the city is entirely within the coastal zone, we do have to harmonize our city's ADU regulations with state ADU regulations and the Coastal Act. Staff do not see the proposed amendments having an impact on coastal resources, so in terms of coastal access, coastal dependent development, and natural resources. The recent state laws have not changed the density or the floor area maximums for ADUs. And ADUs in the beach neighborhood would still be subject to discretionary review if coastal hazards such as flooding or coastal access issues are identified, or if the ADU in some way conflicts with environmentally sensitive habitat area. Quickly before we move on to our discussion items, I did notice there is an error in the proposed ordinance. This is attachment A, page 7. An edit to section 14.72.035. The word one has been struck from subsection A, and that was incorrect. The word one should be left in there. Okay. So staff have 4 key areas that we'd like to get your commission's feedback on. These include height restrictions for ADUs, the optional separate conveyance of ADUs, our Housing Element Program 2 and incentives for affordable ADUs, and then any other concerns or questions that your commission might have about the proposed edits. So our first discussion item has to do with implementing height restrictions. Staff recommend raising the baseline ADU height limit from 16 to 18 feet. So what this would look like is currently in Carpinteria Municipal Code section 1472060C, there are a couple of different regulations that essentially determine how tall your ADU may be. Because of the new state law that says that ADUs that are within a half mile of a major transit stop, for us that's the Amtrak station, or that are on a lot with multifamily, multi-story dwelling, because we have to allow those to be up to 18 feet tall, and that half-mile radius covers a significant portion of the city, we're recommending to essentially streamline our height regulations and to roll in this state law all at the same time, just raising the minimum maximum height limit to 18 feet. I have a supplemental slide that shows this change side by side if you're curious to see that. And also to add some context, the overall height limit for structures in zones that allow ADUs currently is 30 feet. And under our current ADU regulations, ADUs can be as tall as the primary dwelling. So if you have a 25-foot tall primary dwelling, your ADU could also be 25 feet tall, just as an example, under current regulations. The second discussion item is allowing the separate conveyance of ADUs as condos under AB 1033. Again, this is optional, so it is up to local jurisdictions whether or not they'd like to implement this or not. Staff haven't really detected any interest so far in this, and so right now we recommend a wait-and-see approach to gauge the interest of the community and also to see what other nearby jurisdictions are doing. Our third discussion item is incentives for deed-restricted ADUs. In the 2023 to 2031 Housing Element, Program 2 focuses on ADUs. It states that the city will offer incentives such as fee discounts or streamlined processing to applicants when their ADUs are voluntarily deed-restricted for low or moderate income people. We haven't proposed any new language to incorporate this in the ordinance. And this is also technically unrelated to the new state ADU laws, but since we're updating the ADU regulations, this is an opportunity to get your commission's feedback on what these incentives might look like. And our intention is to bring a resolution to the city council that commits the city to a specific incentive structure for these deed-restricted affordable ADUs. I also have a supplemental slide for this once we get into deliberation time that provides some structure to your discussion that might help when you're talking about this, if you'd like that. And fourth, there was a lot of strikeout underline in the proposed ordinance. So if you have any questions about language clarifications or any other minor changes that were made, please feel free to ask. Happy to answer. So then, after all of that information, that brings us to your action options for this evening. Your first option, which is the staff recommendation, is to recommend that the City Council adopt the proposed ordinance, which amends Chapter 14.72 of the Carpinteria Municipal Code to implement changes reflecting state ADU and JADU law, and also to recommend that the City Council determine the proposed ordinance is exempt from CEQA review. Your second action option is to recommend building permit fee reduction amounts and minimum qualifying affordability deed restriction time limits for ADUs that are voluntarily deed restricted for low or moderate income households. So this would be implementing that program 2 of the housing element. Your third option is that your commission may choose not to provide any specific recommendations to the City Council at this time, and staff will bring the proposed ordinance to the City Council with a staff report. And fourth, your commission may recommend revisions to the proposed ordinance and request that the item be brought back to your commission at a future hearing. And this is what a sample motion for action option 1 might look like. So that's the end of my presentation. I know that there's a lot of detail in the staff report that I didn't cover here in the presentation. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Nick and Mac here are also here to help answer any questions. So yes, that concludes my presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to propose something here for the commission, and if you guys are okay with it, we'll do it. If not, I'm fine with that. Normally, we'd go to questions of staff and then open it up for public comment. In something like this, it's the questions may lead to natural discussion and deliberation. So, to avoid it being clunky, I prefer just to see if we have any comments from the public now, and then we'll proceed with questions and comments from the commission after that. Any objections to that? All right. So, anybody from out there want to comment on this item? Public hearing's open? Nope. Okay, great. Thank you. If questions come up along the way.
Chair Lefevers, if we can, I wanted to acknowledge as part of public comment that you did receive one comment letter. Came in late today. I apologize we couldn't get it to you sooner. This is from the California Housing Defense Fund with a few comments on our proposed ordinance, and when or if the time is right, Mac is happy to speak to any of the comments made in there.
Okay, perhaps that would be a good time to hear those.
Thank you. That's what I was going to ask
Yeah.
for. I think it would be good for framing some of the discussion.
Yep, let's do that.
Through the chair, happy to discuss this letter the city received. The letter raises a number of issues that I'd like to walk through one by one. The first is that the city may not prohibit the conversion of commercial spaces. The proposed ordinance before you today recommends a clarification regarding whether or not a commercial space in a mixed-use multifamily development could be converted into an accessory dwelling unit. State ADU law does allow for the city to impose development standards on ADUs, provided that those are objective, and so conversion of non-residential space, in this case things like commercial space, to an accessory dwelling unit or a junior accessory dwelling unit is a pretty clear objective standard, right? You will or will not allow it. Second of all, I would also highlight that the city is uniquely positioned in the coastal zone, that we're proposing to implement ADU law in a manner that implements both the Coastal Act and state ADU law to harmonize both, as Megan put it. And one of the, I think, important considerations would be preserving visitor-serving commercial. And so we see making this clarification as sort of finalizing staff's internal interpretation of how the state law should be read, which in theory only allows for the conversion of non-livable space as part of an ADU project in these mixed-use type projects. And so we just wanted to make it very clear in the ordinance that the city would not consider the conversion of commercial floor area, especially visitor-serving commercial floor area, to accommodate a new accessory dwelling unit in an existing mixed-use structure. So that was the first comment raised in this letter. The second was some comments regarding whether certain design standards suggested by the city, many of which exist in the city's current ordinance, which has been approved by both HCD and the Coastal Commission, are sufficiently objective. Your commission could recommend, further study or clarifications to any of these provisions highlighted in the letter or others to create more objective standards. Third, the letter references that the solar panel requirement in the city's ordinance is unlawful. The city's inclusion of a reference to solar access for solar panels really is a reference to the building code requirements that require access to solar panels. So we don't see it as in conflict with state law, given that ADUs need to be constructed to building code standards. I'm happy to answer any other questions regarding this comment letter or the ordinance as you guys deliberate.
I have a question.
Commissioner Allen, go ahead.
One question on what we just talked about, which is that has HCF litigated any of these issues, or have you seen any litigation yet? It's kind of early for anything to come up, I suppose, but I just wonder whether we've seen anything out there with them seriously approaching these. And I guess being in the coastal zone may make a difference for at least the first one.
Through the chair, Commissioner Allen, I am not familiar with Cal HDF's entire litigation record. I do know that they've been involved. They've sent letters to the city along with a consortium of other groups related to the city's ADU ordinance in the coastal zone. They don't mention or acknowledge that the city is entirely in the coastal zone or that the proposal before you today is a local coastal program amendment rather than just simply a zoning text amendment. That may be an omission, but this group has sent the city letters in the past and is clearly interested in the city adopting or in revising its accessory dwelling unit regulations.
And secondly, maybe it's more like a comment and discussion, but on the design standards, I think the design standards, to the extent we can have them, are very important. I think the consistency of exterior surfaces with the existing structure is a really important thing for the city to be able to enforce. So I'm hoping that if council has any concerns or suggestions for making certain that we have that objective as clear. I hate to use the word objective, that desire on the part of the city to be as clear and defensible as possible, that we have that language. And I'm not sure how it's one of those things we all know when we see it. Shiny roofing and siding, again, if it's not consistent with what exists, it is something that I think it's appropriate for us to say we don't want, and so I see it as a challenge to drafting to make it defensively objective, but want to see us try.
So if we could
On
keep
what he was
focused
just
on this document. Yeah, go ahead.
I also have some comments about the design standards. It's as to the shiny roofing and siding prohibition. I personally think that is a very practical prohibition. Having myself lived in places where the reflection of a roof or some other element on a building at certain times of the day just made me crazy. And we've all had the experience of a windshield where the light is on it and it's blinding when the sun is on it at a certain angle. I don't think that that is a heavy burden on anyone personally. And as to the saying that that the ADU should conform to the primary residence in its exterior treatment of windows, materials, etc. If it is if it causes an undue hardship financially to use the same materials, and off the top of my head, I can't give you an example, but you could have an older house that has some kind of cedar shakes on the roof or cedar shakes on the siding, which could be prohibitively expensive, that we should allow for a substitution that is compatible with the existing house, aesthetically compatible or something like that.
Through the
What's that objective?
through the chair, I guess I'll just say two things quickly. We'd welcome direction from your planning commission on revisiting potential objective standards. I think we've discussed a little bit internally about a proposal for shiny roofing and siding. With respect to design, and hopefully staff will correct me if I'm incorrect, the way the city's ordinance is currently drafted is if your design, your new attached or detached ADU utilizes the existing design of the primary residence, then you go through the ministerial approval process pathway. If there is concern that your ADU by staff at the staff level that the ADU does not align with the design of the primary residence, then the applicant has the option of either redesigning to align with the primary residence or to take their proposal to the architectural board or review board for consideration and approval of the design. So the goal, I think, of this comment is to highlight the need to be as objective as possible to apply standards that would allow for ministerial processing. There is some Coastal Act considerations in terms of those, the objectivity of those standards may not be possible in all situations, but that is the intent, is to still allow for the construction of an accessory dwelling unit that does not match the primary style. It just would require an additional step of review by a discretionary board for only the design elements, not the use itself. And staff can interject if I'm misstating.
I got some.
Well, I might add that having it be similar in architectural style to the primary dwelling is in keeping with our land use plan, which says every which way to maintain the character of the neighborhood.
I have some questions.
Go ahead. Moyer.
I'll be loud.
How does that work with our on-the-shelf sets? I mean, that's they're a distinct architectural style.
Right.
So
So through the chair, Commissioner Moyer, for the pre-designed ADUs that the city's come up with, they're not going to necessarily fit perfectly in every situation, but
Right.
we designed them for the quote-unquote typical single-family neighborhood residence on primarily on the inland side of the highway. So they're designed to kind of a typical either ranch or craftsman style architecture. Each of the pre-designed ADUs has a couple of pre-approved exterior treatment options, so you can choose between a stucco siding or a horizontal wood siding. You can choose between a couple different pre-designed porch options. So there's enough variety hopefully in there that you can pretty closely match the character and materials of the primary residence.
okay, thanks.
Before I give it back to you, David, I need to see if Jane wants to jump in.
Jane does, yeah. I
I'm
want to
sorry.
say something. Who are these people, the HDF, and why do we care? What-
Through the chair, I can look up who the California Housing Defense Fund, but I believe they're a nonprofit organization interested in housing.
And also, I'm not totally in favor of matching designs because sometimes that's an extreme expense for the people building an ADU. And the idea is to get these built. So I'm not in favor of all this matchy-matchy stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary, but I don't know how you write that. So those are my comments.
All right. John, did you have more you
I
want?
feel the same way as Jane does about that.
Okay. All right. So let me just ask one, probably a couple questions around, because I don't want to just spend our whole time on this comment letter. We acknowledge the comments. They're specific to certain items. We can further elaborate on our thoughts with regards to those issues if we'd like during our other discussion topics. So the first question I had for you, Mac, in your initial summary of the request with regards to commercial use, were you recommending that additional clarification be added to our ordinance on that item, or were you just pointing out the opportunity to do so?
Chair Lefevers, the addition that has already been made to the ordinance was staff's attempt to make a clarification that commercial floor area would be excluded from the ability to convert an accessory dwelling unit for conversion into an accessory dwelling unit. If your commission would like further clarifications or to remove that and may potentially allow for conversion of commercial spaces into accessory dwelling units, you can provide that direction to staff. But as proposed, the language is intended to clarify that in mixed-use structures, accessory dwelling units would not be allowed if converted from non-residential square footage.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I missed that initial part. Okay, my second question, and this was actually on my list to ask about, is the requirement for solar for new detached ADUs. So our current ordinance appears to require that, and my question, and this letter calls that into question. My question for staff is that some state requirement or other energy code requirement that we must follow, or do we have the ability to not require solar and reduce the cost burden?
Chair Lefevers, I can take a stab at parts of this one, and maybe Mac will want to help supplement, but it's staff's understanding that newly constructed ADUs are subject to the California Energy Code requirement, which is part of the building code. And so that does require new detached ADUs to have rooftop solar. And I believe the code allows that the rooftop solar can either be put on the ADU itself or it can be put over on the primary dwelling unit. But that new structure is required to have solar in some capacity. That's a requirement of the state building code. And so this is us just simply enforcing state law.
Okay. So it's, Mac, unless you disagree, it's staff's opinion that we don't have the authority to change that.
Agreed.
Okay.
So, it could be removed from the ordinance, but the applicant would still need to comply with the building code requirements, which would be covered in the plan check building code process.
Okay.
If the existing dwelling already has solar panels on the roof, would that be sufficient to cover the ADU if it's a big enough array?
I may be able to speak to this a little bit. I did some reading on this earlier today, and it seems that the reason why additional solar would have to be added for a detached ADU is because it's adding to the energy consumption overall of the primary plus the ADU. And so if the primary residence generates so much electricity that it entirely covers all of the energy consumption that the detached ADU would create then potentially, but in most cases, it does seem that additional solar would be needed.
Right, so in a, hypothetical, if you have an oversized existing rooftop solar system that can meet the additional demand or capacity, or I guess additional demand generated by this ADU, then maybe theoretically you could get away from needing to put in additional solar. But in most cases, rooftop solar that's on an existing house is sized for that house and its existing demands, and so if you're now adding an ADU that's going to be generating additional demand, then you're going to need additional panels to meet that demand.
Actually, on my house, I have a PV solar on the roof, and it is in excess of what we use. And it was put on because we might, in the future, put on, say, all-house air conditioning.
Right, and so
I don't think it's that unusual. It seems like you could just put a little sentence in there, or a specific size of the PV of the
it's
system.
really based on the size of the ADU. So this is something that's calculated as part of your building permit application. You would, an applicant would come in with their building permit application for their ADU. They would do their Title 24 energy calculations that would stipulate, what the energy demands of the ADU would be, and that's going to then stipulate what the size of the panels or how many panels you'll need. So this is already all codified in the building code. Staff doesn't feel there's any need for us to further elaborate on this in our local ordinance because it's already addressed by the state.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I see there's other comments. David?
Yeah, we're on to general comments now.
Yeah, we're wide open
Discussion,
on
right.
questions or comments.
Oh, I have some too.
Some of the
I'll
housing.
get your turns.
Sure.
Go ahead, David. Sorry.
Some of the new housing laws, of course, are triggered by the proximity to a transit. And I just wondered how clear jurisdictions are now in terms of the triggering transit being a situation such as ours, where it is the Amtrak station, which accomplishes little of the presumed legislative intent in having a real transit that is accessible and usable for, the population, because clearly at this moment in time, at least, the few stops that Amtrak makes doesn't do much in terms of affording, reliable, inexpensive transportation to residents. So where are we in any discussions on whether that's going to be a requirement?
So, Vice Chair Allen, this language is in the state law about needing to allow the increased height for ADUs within a half mile. And we've researched this very intensely relative to a different law that has the same language. This was the AB 2097 that eliminates parking for new residential and commercial development within that same half-mile radius. And so, we feel very clear on what the read of the law is and how it applies here, even though, we may or may not fully agree with it. Speculating, I think some of it is, probably kind of future-proofing on the part of the legislature, anticipating, right, that over time, rail transit may improve with Metrolink or similar services that are allegedly coming to the region in the future, and also likely, improvements over time to our mass transit infrastructure in terms of better frequency and, in the sense that over time, I think it's more likely than not, that additional transit stops will qualify in the city as high-quality transit. So then this will apply that much more broadly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that when you read the law, it's pretty unambiguous. I probably should have posed my question more as, is anyone in our jurisdictions looking at negotiating changes in the legislation, perhaps? And from what you're saying, if you're reading the tea leaves correctly, probably not, because they're looking to the future.
Could I say something about this? About the transit stops, may I say something?
Certainly.
Good. A lot of these laws are written by big city people, and they have transit such as it is in America. And downtown LA has lots of metro stops and trains, all kinds of ways to get places without getting in your car, whether you want to or not. So they have allowed 6, 10-story buildings right next to transit stops, and it makes all the sense in the world, and it's actually working. But that law, that philosophy doesn't really work for a small town. And I think we should take some effort to push back on that. What else was I going to say about that? I don't remember now. It was so long ago. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I don't think we should just accommodate. Some days we have to push back. And no parking within half a mile? Oh, please. We're in the beach area where now we're overlapping with beach access when you can't get to the beach because you can't park.
All right, I'm going to make an attempt. I know.
Sorry.
Hang on. I'm going to make an attempt to try to coordinate our comments around the items in this document. You will all have all the opportunity you want to comment in general about everything, but I'd like to make sure we get through some of the key areas first so that we all have an opportunity to comment on them. The first one, I think, is heights. So we have the change to accommodate an 18-foot height instead of a 16-foot maximum height for a single-story ADU. And we also have the 25-foot height limit placed in there. So I had a couple, I guess, comments or questions around that. Let me just start with a question around the 25-foot change. So under the current ordinance, it appears that an ADU could be built up to 30 feet if that's the height of the existing residence, and it's, that's our current ordinance. The proposed change specifies a maximum of 25 feet now. So my question to staff is, and there's also maybe some conflicting language in the ordinance that implies you can still go to 30 feet. So my question to staff is, what's the intent of the proposed draft? Is it 25 feet, period, or is it 25 feet unless you're already 30 feet and then you can match?
Chair Lefevers, that's a good question. Just to read some of the items out of the proposed ordinance. So an accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed the following, whichever is greater. So this is phrasing it such that whichever of these items is the tallest, that represents your maximum height for your ADU. So number 1, it can be the height of the primary residential unit. So if your house is 30 feet tall and is hitting that maximum allowed under the zone, theoretically your ADU could be 30 feet tall. Your ADU shall not exceed the number of stories of the primary residential unit. So if your ADU, or if your primary residence is only 1 story tall, your ADU may not be broken up into more than 1 story. And then we would transition into the allowances under state law. So that's when you get into the 25 feet if your ADU is attached to your primary dwelling. So in that case, even if your house was shorter than 25 feet tall, if the ADU is attached, your ADU may be up to 25 feet tall. It wouldn't have to be, but you would technically be given that option under state law. And then it would go to the 18 feet if your ADU is within half a mile of the Amtrak station or is on a multifamily lot that has a multifamily multi-story dwelling. So if it's, a 2-story apartment complex, then your ADU could be up to 18 feet tall. And so that 18 feet, we're essentially just kind of setting as one of those benchmarks that your ADU could potentially meet, and you would still be able to choose whichever is, the most permissive under these options.
Okay, so thank you. And I think I got the answer to my question. So we can still go 30 feet, but we're allowed to go 25 no matter what, even if we have a single story or if we meet other criteria.
Correct, yes. If your ADU is attached to the primary dwelling, it could be up to 25 feet tall.
Okay.
And 2 stories.
Questions around that 25-foot
Yes.
or comments? All right, lots of questions.
And we have the option in the ordinance, however, of restricting that 25-foot, specific 25-foot allowance for a structure that is less than 25 feet to the half-mile radius.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Allen, the 25-foot is, here, maybe I can head back to the, so the half-mile radius has to do with the 18-foot requirement.
Only.
Only,
Okay.
yes.
So we are stuck with the potential for a 16-foot residence with a 25-foot ADU.
That is a
Okay.
potential situation that could
Okay,
happen.
thank you.
On that item, you know, the height, how does it relate to have 2 more feet to a transit stop? What's the relation? Unless you're gonna build a whole nother unit in those 2 feet, but I don't get it.
Through the chair, Commissioner Benefield, I could speculate on the intention of state law is that it would potentially allow for a 2-story ADU,
That's probably it.
but that is the speculation of
All right.
what the state law was
That's
meaning
what
by
I
that.
would think, but still, okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Moyer, did you have anything on this item? Commissioner Salant on the height?
Perhaps this is the same question that Jane is raising, but what is the relation between being within a half mile of a transit stop and building height? I mean, I don't get it.
Through the chair, Commissioner Salant.
Just said.
The intention, you know, from what we might construe is that if you're trying to create a population that's less dependent on cars for transportation, building more transportation closer to transit stops would then allow fewer people to require a car to get around because they would live close to that transit stop.
But to your point, Commissioner Salant, you know, I
Thank
think
you.
I think it is a stretch. You know, we're kind of left here scratching our heads too as to what the legislative intent was here. But this is what the legislature passed, and this is what we're obligated to comply with.
Well, like Jane said, that's designed for cities.
Yes.
That's to push the cities, and not really the small towns are really going to make it really hard. So one thing about, you know, when you have a AUD adjoined to a residence and you have 25 feet, that means that you could have your garage, you could build on top of your garage. So, and that's a very economic thing to do. Best way to do this ADU is to convert your garage.
Your foundation is strong enough.
Even still.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so and the ordinance is proposing the 18 feet citywide for simplicity and consistency of application. So I support that. I think that's a good change. I would ask, and I'll give you guys a chance to comment as well, if you could take a look at page 15 of the ordinance, the proposed ordinance, under item F on page 15, which is privacy standards.
Sorry, which 15 are we looking at?
It's on the proposed draft ordinance. It's page 27 of the staff report.
Okay,
It's,
I don't think I'm
Are you-
sorry, I'm confused too. What are we?
so staff report, page 27, should be page 15 of the proposed draft ordinance, item F, privacy standards. So we specify 16 feet
Got it.
in the paragraph there as being, you know, the following, if you're above 16 feet. It seems to me that should be changed to 18 feet to be consistent with the limit change in the rest of the ordinance. The conditions really only talk about upper story stuff, but again, that 16 feet seems inconsistent now if we don't change it here.
Chair LaFevers, that is a change that we can make. We can change that from 16 to 18 feet.
Okay.
Right.
All right, thank you. And David, did you have?
Oh, I'm simply going to agree. I thought we were going through these one by one and
Yep.
indicating
We're
our
still
agreement
on-
or disagreement.
Yep.
Yes,
Run
I
height.
agree on the 18 feet.
I agree too.
Okay, so we're good on the 25 feet. We're good on the 18 feet with this one change. That's the only one I found in there that I thought was created a question. All right. And I may want to come back to some of these, but since we're done with the height changes, the next at least request for us to consider specifically was on potential deed opportunities to do condo conversions. So, I mean, I'll just, at this time, I would not support that. I think the affordability of the ADU might be further compromised if it was converted to a condominium and sold as such. So I think for me, that kind of flies in the face of what we're trying to accomplish with allowing ADUs to be developed as part of a property. So I agree with the proposal of staff to consider that at some future date. I would not suggest we consider it in this update. So happy to hear thoughts on that.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I agree, but I have a question.
Sure.
I totally agree with you. Everything you said was brilliant. But if you were to do this, would it entail a parcel map or a subdivision? I cannot believe the nightmare that would be. So I'm opposed to that, yeah.
Through the chair, Commissioner Benefield, yes, this would have to comply with the Subdivision Map Act and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah,
That's expensive.
yeah. Well, tough.
Yeah,
I think it would be a nightmare. I think it would be a very bad idea, just in the practicalities. If you have
Right.
a backyard and you have an ADU, what are the easement issues between the two parties? If you're the primary owner, you have some control over presumably the activity in the accessory dwelling unit. I mean, lights out after 10 p.m., no noisy parties. And I can just, having myself have to personally deal with easement issues like that, it's just a nightmare.
Commissioner Slunt, you're absolutely correct. You know, this would, if the city were to go down this route, you would have to, likely create CC&Rs for each of these individual condos, stipulating who's responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of what and
It's
how
just
you
like,
deal with
no,
all those shared amenities.
We don't need
It's
this. We have enough to
very
deal with.
complicated.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the next thing on the list?
Okay, so thanks, and there will be other items that we want to come back to, but the next item is the discussion on creating incentives. So I mean, I'll just start off here, but I'm very interested in hearing comments from other commissioners. A couple thoughts. One is, I'm glad we're taking the opportunity to update the ADU ordinance. Now's a good time for clarity and to make sure it's consistent with new state law. That's great. I'm concerned that we burden that effort by trying to reach agreement on appropriate incentives for designated affordable items. I'm certainly open to moving in that direction. I think ultimately we should have that. So I question how valuable it's really going to be. I mean, the whole concept of ADU is, especially with the kinds of incentives that we might be able to offer, reduced fees. I mean, the whole idea is that fees are already low. But nonetheless, that's editorial, I guess. So here's my caveat. I'm interested in discussing it. I don't want to get bogged down in trying to create some complex incentive program that's going to go along with this ordinance update. I'd like to get this off of the city staff's plate as quickly as possible. There's plenty of other items to deal with. And so that's my overall comment, I think. And then as far as trying to craft specific incentives, if we do want to do when we do that, whether we do it, some of it tonight or what the council wants us to do it, I guess I would need maybe some more information on what's appropriate, how we do that. Again, to be have them be meaningful in this context might take a little bit of research and thought. So that's where I'm at. I'm happy to consider it. I'm suggesting that we don't try to craft that and incorporate it into this document tonight, but I'll open it up to others for comment.
Chair Lefevers, if I may, just before the board or the commission continues with deliberations, a couple clarifications might be helpful. So even though we've teed this up for discussion tonight, this incentives discussion is sort of separate and parallel to the ADU ordinance amendments. So the incentives program isn't part of the ordinance. It's not proposed to be part of the ordinance. It would be its own separate vehicle that the council would adopt just strictly through a resolution. So it's not part of tonight's ordinance. We just thought, since we're here discussing ADUs, discussing the changes to the ordinance already, that we could also, at a very high level, kind of brainstorm on whether the commission thinks that there's, benefit to offering incentives in exchange for homeowners, deciding to deed restrict their ADUs for affordable income levels, and if the commission has any feedback or thoughts on that we can use in crafting a policy to bring to the council at a later time, with the intention of meeting this housing element program, right? So they're related in that they both deal with ADUs, but they're kind of two separate efforts, two separate exercises. I don't want to muddy the waters here into thinking that one is somehow tied to the other.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And with that, I know others want to talk, but I'm in control now. So
Yeah, aren't you?
So perhaps we want to just finish our discussion on the proposed ordinance before we dive into the discussion on the incentives.
That'd be fine if that makes the most sense to the commission.
That okay
that's a
with-
fine way to do
Well,
it.
I mean,
I'm in agreement with your comments already, and I'd only add that I think that this will, it sounds like it's going to largely be a budgetary decision that the council will make if the incentives are primarily financial.
Yeah,
I agree too.
I agree with what you said, except one thing. When you say affordable, it has to be low income, because this moderate income, I probably qualify for that.
Yeah.
So it has to be clear that this is to help our RENA numbers with real houses. These are RENA counted okay. Yeah, except for that part, I agree with what you said, Glenn.
I have a suggestion about incentives. How about a property tax incentive? If you build an ADU in your backyard, presumably your property tax would go up, right? Your assessment would go up?
I think so.
I mean, if you build a bedroom on the back of your house, your assessment will go up. So if,
Commissioner Salant, I believe you're correct that there would be, with any kind of improvement to a property, whether it's an addition or an ADU, there would be some kind of incremental, reassessment of the value of that improvement onto your property taxes. I don't know what authority the city has, if any, to, offer or broker a tax break on what that would look like. That might be outside of our.
I don't know, it seems to me
authority.
like it's worth exploring. Property taxes here are really high.
That could be the incentive discussion.
Yeah, so
Good.
property taxes are set through, what is it, Prop 13 at 1% and change of the purchase price of the land. And so, that.
Oh, my friend.
And then how that
No,
tie.
Of the house.
No, they're not, because they have all these fees that they add on in addition to whatever you paid for your property, it's 1%, then City of Carpinteria adds on a whole bunch of other fees.
Oh, yeah.
We add on other assessments, but those are not part of the property tax. So there's an assessment for the lighting district, there's an assessment for the sanitary district, there's assessments for different services that are provided by the city, but the actual property tax is set by the state at that roughly 1% and then adjusted annually by an inflationary index.
I see. Well, when we get the bill, it's not clear that there's any difference.
That's supposed to be clear. You know?
I had to look it up and really go to the root hairs to find out why it was so much more than 1%.
The root hairs.
And then even that 1% that's collected is, divvied up as the state defines it, where the lion's share of it goes to first education and public safety, and then only a very small slice of the pie ends up with the city for general fund discretionary revenues. So at best, maybe the city could have some control over that small slice of the pie, but I don't think we could, discount on behalf of public education or public safety.
Just a thought to get more ADUs. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to table the discussion on incentives for the moment at least. We can come back to it if we think there's more value to be had there. I do want to wrap up on the proposed draft ordinance. I had a couple other questions, I guess, and then perhaps others do as well. So the revisions have been made to further clarify the pre-approved plans program. And I know in some of our previous presentations on housing law, it seemed like there was some pretty specific requirements in that about any plans, any approved ADUs automatically become pre-approved for the next applicant, and those have to be built into your program. Am I misinterpreting what I heard? And my question really is there enough detail in here, or is additional detail needed to make sure we don't have to come back around at the beginning of the year to address that again?
Maybe.
So, Chair LaFevers, for the purposes of the ordinance, we just wanted to clarify that if a applicant comes in with one of these pre-approved, pre-designed ADU plans, they get the benefit of the streamlined plan check, the 30 days versus 60 days. The rest of the state law in terms of the mechanics of how we review these pre-designed plans, how we post them to our website, we intend to comply with all that, but it's kind of outside of this ordinance. It's really more of a, kind of a administrative staff procedures type of issue in terms of how we post these pre-designed plans to the website, make the contact information available, so on and so forth. So it doesn't, that part of it, we don't believe needs to be part of the ordinance. The only part that really needs to be part of the ordinance is that statutory requirement to streamline the review and approval of those pre-designed plans.
And Chair, just to clarify, the law requires the city to establish a process, the pre-approved plans process. Then it's applicant driven. So it's not that the city would take any approved ADU plan and then make it publicly available on its website through this pre-approved plan process. The applicant would need to submit a specific request to the city for a pre-approved plan to be added to the city's website, and then the city would follow that procedure.
Okay,
So it's not
got
like
it. Okay.
if you submitted one for your home, for example, that wouldn't be publicly available on the website.
Okay,
It would
thanks
only
for
be
that
if you
clarification. So we don't anticipate, from what we know now of state law, the proposed revisions in this draft will cover, we believe, and won't need to be revisited at the beginning of the year unless something else changes or.
How do you know?
We'll see what the legislature comes up with this year, but at the moment, this would have us be compliant.
All right.
Like this Target.
All right. And one last question from me, and then I'll turn it over. And I think I know the answer to this, but I just feel obligated to ask it. It has to do with fire sprinklers. And I know there's language in the ordinance, and I'll point you to an area of a little inconsistency here in a minute with the language. But my question is, the way the ordinance reads, well, I won't say that. The way that the ordinance is being applied, new ADUs that are being built in Carpinteria are required to be fire sprinklered if they're detached. If it's a new detached ADU, fire sprinklers are being required. And my question is, do we have to do that?
Yeah.
Through the chair, my reading of our ordinance is that we only require fire sprinklers of an ADU if the primary dwelling unit has fire sprinklers. That's the city's ordinance. That's what the city's requirement is. The fire district may have their own interpretations that come to them through the state fire marshal, but I can't really speak for the district. I've heard similar kind of questions that the fire district is requiring fire sprinklers in certain circumstances, but I can't speak to how or why they're doing that. The city's ordinance says only if the existing house, the primary dwelling unit is sprinklered, then the ADU also has to be sprinkled.
Even for new detached?
Correct.
Okay.
Why?
So there's, and then the, and I think well, I guess, so what you're saying is we don't really have control over what the fire district is doing. They're applying, if they're applying that requirement to ADUs being permitted through the city, then the city has no ability to override that. Is that what you're saying?
Chair LaFevers, that's essentially how it's functioned, is that, right, when somebody comes in for a permit for an ADU, they need not only a permit from the city, but they may also need a permit from the fire district. They may also need a permit from the water district. They may also need a permit from the sanitary district for all the myriad utility connections and services and what have you. The city is responsible for administering and enforcing their own regulations, but we don't really have the authority to supersede or overrule the other special districts. They're supposed to also comply with these laws, but if they're getting, alternative guidance from the state fire marshal or from their legal counsel, they might, defer to that rather than, to our reading of state law.
Well, I acknowledge it is, it is a safety, health and safety component. I guess I was surprised that that's the outcome of the ordinance, because it's a significant additional expense, just like the solar is, right? So we got these things that we seem to have no control over that are just adding tens of thousands of dollars to each ADU. And I'm just looking for ways to chip away at that.
I think we're in agreement with you, and this is something that we've continued to try to work on with the other special districts, is to make sure that we're applying these laws consistently. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, we don't have the authority to tell them how to interpret their laws.
Okay. So one last comment on that, and I'll turn it over. In the ordinance, that language is referenced in two different locations in the ordinance, page 10 and page 19. And the language is not the same, and I think it would help if it was. It's very close, similar, but it's not the same. I'm not sure I have a preference one way or the other. Perhaps you guys could pick
Chair
the one
Lefevers,
that's...
I see what you're looking at. It is same meaning, slightly different wording. We're happy to make those two consistent. One of them is in regards to required features for ADUs, and the other one is in regard to required features for special ADUs. So the same state requirement applies, so we can make that language consistent.
And through the chair, yes, I agree with everything that's stated. I would just add that state law reiterates these fire sprinkler requirements on both ADUs and special ADUs, and uses different language for both in both sections. So I would suspect that the reason for the inconsistency in the city's ordinance stems from the inconsistency in state law, but we can certainly resolve that and clarify that in our own ordinance.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
And I have a quick question.
I'm
on the
opening
fly.
it up to others, Jane.
The sprinkler thing, what's the nexus between having it in the main house and then requiring it in the ADU? Well, who cares?
Commissioner Benefield, so going forward, I don't know if it may be state law that any new residence is supposed to be sprinklered. And so, in a nod to, trying to protect the affordability of ADUs, there was a carve-out to
Right.
requiring sprinklers in a new ADU if the existing house doesn't already have sprinklers. It's really just about trying to do a cost savings of not needing to run another water line up to the house, so, the additional infrastructure, really.
I agree, shouldn't. I mean, we're not cooperating with making it low income, low cost to build these things. And some people are going to spare no expense, but the idea is to provide housing. So that's another chink in the armor.
Thanks. Commissioner Moyer?
I just wanted to make an observation of this discussion and all these different implements and everything, and all these different agencies and all that you have to go through to get a home. And I go back to Mr. Sanchez in 1931, out there in that field, building a home for his family. And that there's something just refreshing about that. That's just for some, there's a movement about touch the earth lightly. We're not doing that. We're not touching the earth lightly. And I'm going to hold on to that vision of Mr. Sanchez out there building his own home. I think that's so cool.
Thanks. Commissioner Salant, did you have additional?
I have some questions about the occupancy and the amount of time that an accessory dwelling unit can be occupied for 31 days or I'm confused about that, and it has to do with short-term rental, vacation rental, but it appears that you can have, that the primary residence does not have to be owner-occupied, nor does the ADU have to be owner-occupied. You could even throw a JDU in there, which doesn't have to be owner-occupied. So in a residential neighborhood, you could have 3 units in there of separate households, which within a residential neighborhood is going to cause a lot of disruption.
Through the chair, Commissioner Salant, if I may make a clarification, JADUs do require an owner occupancy.
Okay, well,
So
then-
if
you
you're-
can't have 3, you can only have 2. But still, having 2 for 30-day rentals of 2 properties within a residential neighborhood can be quite disruptive.
The intention of these rental terms is because the rental would have to be for 31 days or longer, is to essentially make them have the residents be long-term residents who could be on a 31-day month-to-month type of lease. It wouldn't work out exactly month-to-month because some months are shorter than 31 days. But you could have a situation in which, for example, the owner perhaps lived in the JADU and then rented out the primary home and the ADU, and both of those could be rented out for terms of 31 days or greater. That is correct.
Well, I think it's still for a primarily residential neighborhood, when you start having multiple units on one lot, be 30-day rentals, especially in this town where in the summer they could easily become vacation rentals. It starts to become very disruptive to the other households in the neighborhood.
And ADUs theoretically couldn't be used as short-term rentals under our city's current municipal code because the definition of a short-term rental is 30 days or less. And so this would take them out of the realm, technically, of a short-term rental. And if somebody did have a part of their property that they wanted to make a short-term rental, they would still have to be licensed by the city. They would have to get one of those short-term.
Sorry, we're mixing up. So less than 30 days is considered, I guess, short-term, and in the
Correct.
beach area, you have that situation, in the summer especially, where properties are rented by the week, by the day, practically. In the rest of the city, a property must be rented for at least 30 days or more.
Correct.
But in the summer, you can have a succession of tenants. Every month is a new tenant. So that's a lot of, and so you can have two houses where every month you have a turnover of residents, and it becomes quite disruptive to the neighborhood.
Commissioner Slant, you're correct. That is a theoretical possibility, and it would be consistent with state law and city law. Short-term rental is defined by both the city and the state as an occupancy that's rented for 30 consecutive days or less. So anything longer than 30 days is not considered a short-term rental. So
Okay.
theoretically, could you have somebody who, rents out their ADU for 31 days at a time? Yes, it's possible.
While they also rent their own house.
For 31 days at a time, yes, it's possible. And this is something that, does occur to some degree already. We get, complaints about this fairly regularly from homeowners saying, hey, I think my neighbor is operating an illegal short-term rental, and then we have to go investigate it. And then we find that they're renting for 31 days at a time, and there's nothing we can do about it.
But even that, I mean, maybe there's nothing you can do, but, and it's not to say, I don't want to sound like a NIMBY person, because I think that the accessory dwelling unit, the whole program is very needed, is very important, but it needs to be done in a way that's not disruptive to existing neighborhoods, because you want to encourage people in existing neighborhoods to put such a thing in the backyard if it's big enough.
I don't disagree with you. We're, hemmed in every which way by the state on these sorts of things.
Okay. Another question I had was about, the JDU can have a kitchen or not have a kitchen, but it cannot have a bathroom or have a bathroom. I don't know, it seems, can you clarify this?
Commissioner Slant, in terms of the bathroom, a JADU is allowed to share a bathroom with the primary residence, but there would have to be an interior door where the person living in the JADU could access the primary residence. So you couldn't require somebody to, for example, go outside and go around and come in the front door. So yes, a JADU can share a bathroom with the primary residence. In terms of the bathroom, in terms of the kitchen, yes, a JADU may contain an efficiency kitchen, which I believe is defined as, at a minimum, appliances for cooking food and refrigeration. These can be built-in or they can be countertop appliances. There must be a sink that's at least 12 by 12 inches, that is not the same sink that's in the bathroom, and some sort of counter for food preparation. So that is an efficiency kitchen.
And again, this is all lifted right out of state law.
Are there, do we have any of those in town? I mean, how does it work?
We do have five JADUs that have been applied for, and I think maybe the first one or two have received their building permits, so they're under construction currently, but I don't think we have any that are completed yet. And I don't know offhand whether they have shared bathing and or cooking facilities with the primary dwelling. But this is allowed under state law.
I think it could, I just think having to share a bathroom with somebody that's renting in your house, just,
No, and it's just an option, right? So, homeowner has the options here of they could design a JADU that is entirely self-contained with its own
Right,
cooking and
right.
bathing
I get it.
facilities, or they can design one that has shared facilities. It's about giving flexibility, I think, to the property owners and trying to kind of, create as many avenues to accommodating JADUs as possible. That's to the best I could tell, that's the intent of the legislature here with these myriad amendments each year to the ADU laws, is trying to just open up the number of opportunities for these ADUs to be installed on any given property.
And if I might add, a lot of these things are may. A JADU may have an efficiency kitchen. It also may have a full kitchen. So that, again, is an option that the property owner has of how self-contained and how many amenities they want to provide in their ADU or JADU.
Anything else?
No.
Nope. Okay. John, nothing else? Okay.
I do have one question about the very, at the very beginning, on page 2, the whereas, one up from the bottom. So 3 up from the bottom, okay, let's just do the 2 one. 2 up from the bottom, whereas, and it has to do with exemptions from the CEQA, and it says categorically exempt from review. And that's a pretty strong word. I'm wondering, what is the rationale for such a strong word as that, and why it couldn't say can be?
Commissioner Salant, I thought we might allow our long-range planner and resident CEQA expert Mindy Fogg to get a word in here tonight, if she'd like to.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Commissioner Salant, for your question. So what this is a finding of your commission and then ultimately of the city council, is whether or not it's exempt from having to go through a full environmental review for this ordinance. And typically what you look to is whether or not this ordinance would result in substantive changes to the environment, physical changes. And the thought process here is that the addition of these accessory dwellings would be in an already kind of developed environment. It's already a usable backyard space or within an existing home, and that kind of addition, even on a cumulative level, would not have a significant impact on the environment. And so most jurisdictions across the state are using these types of exemptions from CEQA to pass the ordinance. Mac?
I agree with everything that Ms. Fogg said. The one specific additional thing I'd like to hit on is there's actually 2 types of exemptions in CEQA. Those are statutory exemptions, and so those are written into statute in the Public Resources Code. And then there's another type called categorical exemptions, and that's why the term categorical is used in the ordinance here. And those are adopted by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and they're called the CEQA guidelines. And so when we use the term statutory exemptions or statutorily exempt, we're referring to a specific provision in the Public Resources Code. And when we refer to categorically exempt, it means we're referring to the CEQA guidelines or CEQA regulations for these categories of activities that have been found exempt through regulation.
And just to add on to that, so the state has created a whole suite of these categorical exemptions for different types of projects, right? So construction of small buildings up to, I think 4 single-family dwellings can be considered a categorical exemption. It doesn't require any CEQA review. Reconstruction or repurposing of an existing structure is a different type of categorical exemption. There's all these different categories that the state has come up with that if your project fits into that bucket, then it can be excluded from needing to do any further CEQA review. So this is a streamlining, really, tool that the state has come up with to not have to go through an exhaustive environmental review for every single project that a city looks at.
Then it seems as if they should say it is a category exemption. I mean, categorically sounds like never. It just ties, I read that and I say, we're tying our hands. And unnecessarily.
Commissioner Slant, I think another thing to keep in mind is that these CEQA exemptions are just for passing the ordinance itself. It's just for the language of the ordinance. There is still a possibility that some ADUs in the city could undergo a discretionary review, which could involve, some sort of CEQA analysis getting involved if the ADU is going to interfere with environmentally sensitive habitat, if the ADU is somehow going to block coastal access. There is still a route for ADUs themselves to undergo CEQA analysis, but this text, this ordinance itself, that's what we're saying here in these recitals, is that this ordinance is exempt from being reviewed under CEQA.
I see. Okay, well, I could suggest in language
I think
change.
that term categorically exempt is just a term of art that's used in the planning world to refer to being exempted under one of these categorical exemptions.
Under a category exemption. Okay, got it.
Okay. I think we've completed our questions and comments and consensus building. We had a couple minor edits, but nothing substantive. So unless there's additional discussion, I'd look for a motion from a commissioner to move this on to the council.
Through the
David?
chair, if you like, I'd be happy to make a motion. And here's a sample motion. We can just use that. And I move to recommend that the council adopt the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 14.72 of the Carpinteria Municipal Code regarding ADU and JADU regulations, that the council find the proposed ordinance statutorily exempt from SEQR review, and that the council find the, from SEQR review under the Public Resources Code, Section 21080.17, and that the City Council find the proposed ordinance categorically exempt from SEQR review pursuant to 15303. And we do not have any additional recommendations. That's correct?
Just the minor edits that we discussed tonight,
Yes.
but nothing substantive.
Yeah.
So updating the privacy standards to match the same 18-foot height language.
Yes.
That's the new height limit, and then also aligning or clarifying the fire sprinkler language under ADUs and special ADUs to be
Yes.
consistent.
The second would be a change. The first was in the recommendation, was it not? But that doesn't matter. I mean, the 18-foot.
Yes,
was
the
part of it.
18-foot is in the recommendation, but we're talking about on page 15.
That-
Chair LaFevers specifically wanted us to change another area where we were referring to 16 feet, and that was different.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Okay, that's my motion.
Sorry, one more quick clarification. I believe staff presented a minor typographical edit in the PowerPoint. Is that included in your motion to recommend?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and your second stands, Jane?
Yes,
Okay.
certainly.
So we have a motion and a second, and let's do a roll call vote on this, if you would, please, just for clarity.
Apologies. Commissioner Moyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Slant,
Yes.
Commissioner Benefield,
Yes.
Vice Chair Allen,
Yes.
and Chair LaFevers.
Yes.
Go Megan.
Okay, motion passes, and this will be moved on to the city council. Thank you very much for
Thank you all very much.
the staff report. Very helpful.
Great staff report.
Yeah, really was.
I do want to ask if the commission does want to provide any feedback on those incentives. I know you said that you wanted to potentially get through the ordinance first and then have a conversation. That's on the table if you would like to have that conversation.
I'm happy to hear from other commissioners. I reviewed them. I guess, I mean, I don't think I have enough information to make any kind of a substantive recommendation to the council, other than I agree we should be looking towards some kind of an incentive program. But other commissioners want to?
What?
I think my comment was simply, I think at least most incentives probably require budgetary considerations by council because it's money that will be lost to the city.
I think the ADU is an incentive enough. You know, that's we've come a long way from the guest houses on 8,000 square feet to this, and I think we've come far enough for now. Maybe we'll need it later.
I think it's kind of buggy. If you do a unit, a deed restricted unit, does it go to the lottery?
Commissioner Moyer, it would not necessarily need to go through the city's affordable housing lottery. It could be administered, this is just theorizing here, but it could be administered similar to the city's density bonus affordable deed restricted units, where the landlord is responsible for doing the income verification to demonstrate that their tenant would qualify for whatever the income level is, and then there'd be some kind of, ongoing annual reporting requirement to the city to demonstrate that they're continuing to rent their affordable ADU
Yeah.
in compliance with the deed restriction.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm willing to kick it down the road too.
Yeah, I mean, this exercise is really just, kind of more of a brainstorming exercise, if you will, for the commission. If you have, specific thoughts or ideas that you want to pass along to staff and the council for consideration, we're more than happy to do so. We're obligated per our housing element to, kind of explore this idea and see what we can come up with. And rather than us just concocting it on our own, we figured we'd, kind of put some ideas out there for the commission to think about, see what sticks to the wall, and, kind of go from there.
This is the one thing that the state's not going to like, is that you don't have the discretionary or a deed restricted element in your code. Is that true?
So we do commit in our housing element to updating our inclusionary ordinance, which is our, kind of main city mechanism to try to produce affordable housing. And some of the, kind of ideas that are looked at as part of that update are to apply the inclusionary ordinance to larger rental projects. Right now, it only applies to ownership projects. And perhaps looking at ways to require inclusionary units that are for these lower income levels. Right now, we only provide units through the inclusionary program for what we call above moderate or workforce housing.
Oh,
So, that's one way that we can, start to require some provision of lower income units through these, larger housing projects. But we're always looking for other strategies and tools to, either require in some cases or incentivize the production of affordable housing. So density bonus is another one of these tools that's offered by the state, that incentivizes the provision of affordable housing, and in exchange you get additional dwelling units to add to your project and, concessions from development standards and so on and so forth. So there's quite a few different programs out there at the state level. There's some opportunity for the city to develop their own programs to all try to help facilitate or encourage, or in some cases require, low-income housing.
And just to add briefly, as things stand now, the city cannot require an ADU to be deed restricted to lower moderate income. So that, because that is completely up to the decision of the property owner, providing an incentive might help convince property owners to do that, but we can't require them to do that.
And I guess I'll maybe have the final comment on this one. And one concern that I would have with regards to an incentive program is that, to the extent that it might encourage construction of ADUs in areas where we might otherwise prefer not to have them, because I know there's, the ability to construct ADUs in parking lots of multifamily developments, those kind of things where we might have some concerns. I guess I would be interested in ensuring that we weren't incentivizing something that had other consequences that weren't consistent with our interests in the city. So I don't know if that's clear or not, but those are the kinds of ADU developments that might be looking for some kind of incentive, right, as opposed to what perhaps we might more think of as, the unit in the backyard kind of a thing, right? So that would be a concern that I would have about an ordinance that we'd want to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting
Isn't there
question.
an ordinance that there is an ordinance that allows ADUs and multifamily developments? That's correct, right?
That is
Yeah.
correct. I think what Chair LaFevers was saying was, perhaps if you incentivize, these types of ADUs too much, you might get some of these projects or some folks trying to take advantage of these incentives, and they'll decide, you know what, I will convert my carport now to an ADU because you've made it so attractive to me. So kind of this thing of maybe unintended consequences in some way. The state allows for these structures to be built either way, but if you make the incentives too attractive, maybe you get more than you wanted. If you make the incentives not attractive enough, maybe you don't get any takers.
You get way down the road.
Okay, so I think that's probably all you're gonna get from the commission tonight on that item, so thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Okay, we're gonna move on from that item. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think.
we did.
You had me wondering. Don't do that. So let's move on. Is there anything under other business that staff has?
I apologize, Chair, I've lost my agenda, but I don't believe I have anything for you under other business.
Okay.
I do.
And then we're going to move to matters presented by commissioners.
Yes, so under,
Commissioner Salant has an item.
yes, okay. Addressed to the city planning staff, I would like a consolidated list of the rules under which the planning commission operates. And I understand the list is scattered throughout the Carpinteria Municipal Code, and I need a consolidated list. And as a relatively new commissioner, I've now been here nearly a year, nonetheless, I'm still a newcomer. It would help me a lot to learn what the rules are. Anecdotally, I've asked the same person the same question twice and gotten different answers.
Commissioner Slant, we can work on putting something together for, I think all the commissioners would benefit from it.
Yes, I think so. And it would explain the difference between legislative issues that are not covered by the Brown Act and ones that are, which came up tonight. Thank you.
Perhaps there's something available from, some of our partners as well. It seems like in some of our training materials or presentations presented by other or support agencies, they may have at least a good framework to start from.
I was going to say the same thing. There's some planning commissioner handbooks out there from the state of California
But we need
organizations, and that would be a
the
good
city, though. We need the city.
starting point.
Well, we need the city
Yes, the
laws. And
city's
what's
rules.
appealable, what isn't appealable, what abstain means, what no means, things like that. The rules, like she said, which are scattered throughout the municipal code, not in one place.
Okay.
Sorry, more work.
No, thank you for that clarification. I think what we heard was maybe two buckets of information. There's the zoning code, general plan, planning rules, and criteria that your council and the zoning code uses to review projects, and then there's procedural, legal, meeting management style rules, and we could provide a handbook on both sets of that information. Am I hearing that correctly? Is that a fair summary?
Well, I hope that you can give me a list soon, because we have a meeting coming up in 4 weeks.
I was just going to add, I think we've done some trainings in years past that touch on, a lot of this. So I was going to, suggest that we can, try to dust some of those off and see where they need to be updated and recirculate them to your commission.
Okay. We did have a training last year, I believe. It was almost solely about ethics.
Yeah.
Right, and we've done some, I think, in the past related to maybe the Brown Act. We've done
Code of conduct, meetings. So AB 1234 training will cover motion making, meetings, ethical obligations. We've also done trainings on findings and environmental review, land use planning framework.
Could use a refresher.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah. If I may, it's been a while for some of those, and I think it would be beneficial to have a meeting devoted to some of the basics.
Okay.
And just lost my train of thought.
Oh, join the club.
Happens.
We're all
Glenn?
ready to go
Think
home.
about that while we hear from Jane. Go ahead.
Comment. Yeah, I want to say how really great that report was. It was a very good job. And the quality of your work in the planning department is excellent. I'd just like to thank you for that, because I know
you.
how hard it is. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything else matters by commissioners? Okay. Director's report?
I apologize, Chair. You're catching me off guard here, trying to write down notes from the last item, and you're moving on.
Take your time.
In your director's report this month, you have the city calendar for the month of March, the planning activity report for the month of February, and the building permit report also for the month of February. I did want to highlight just a couple things on here as part of the city calendar here for March. We are hoping to hold the General Plan Update Committee meeting for the first time in several years later this month. So that's set for March 18th. We do not yet have the agenda out, but we're hoping to hold that meeting. This first meeting will be kind of just a sort of a reintroduction, if you will, and kind of refresher of where things left off several years ago. What the current status of the general plan update is, and where we see ourselves heading here over the next few months. So we're excited to kick that off and hoping to bring that to the committee here later this month. And then I touched on this earlier, but as part of the planning activity report, I did want to note that your commission's approval of the Clintner mixed-use project last month did get appealed to the city council. So I just wanted to make you aware of that as well, in case you're interested in following along on that project. And that concludes my director's report.
Okay. Thank you very much. I believe that concludes our agenda. David? Oh, attendance at the next meeting. So do we have a scheduled meeting?
April 1st.
Should we come prepared?
Do you have any projects that you anticipate will be on that agenda?
Vice Chair Allen, I apologize, I don't have the list in front of me, but I believe we do have a couple of projects that are parked there tentatively.
Okay.
All right. I'm assuming commissioners will be present for April 1?
Yes.
Yes. That's a five person attendance. Okay. Now we're to adjournment. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work, and we're adjourned.